Okay, good morning, everybody. I would want to make a broadcast today. It will be a bit complicated for me to make because it will tie up and connect between a few categories of thinking that are not typically usually connected one to the other, but you will see that the connection is would be very natural. And this is around the warnings against a bureaucratic totalitarianism, okay? Bureaucratic totalitarianism. And I will want to start with the following video from Elon Musk, and then I will want to show you how warnings against these situations that society is found in are already found in thinkers from 50 years ago and let's say 80 years ago. One of them is Debord, and the other one, surprisingly, is Rabbi Baal HaSulam from 80 years ago from Israel, and I hope that it will be very interesting, and I'm sure that it is also very important. So let's listen to what is going on now in the newly elected American administration, American government. And let's listen to something very interesting that Elon Musk is saying.
The goal of those, and I think a significant part of this presidency is to restore democracy. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and
okay, so Elon Musk is referring to a very specific concept. Okay, he's using a very specific terminology, which he coins as the rule of the bureaucracy. Okay, bureaucrats are ruling, and this will be the key subject of today's broadcast. What is this rulership of the bureaucracy, and is there previous human thought about this subject? Okay, and how to deal with it, warnings against it, thought about it. Let's see.
Then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the
Okay, so Elon is saying we live in a bureaucracy. We do not live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. Okay, and the American people have a glorious past history of solving very hard theoretical questions in subject of social philosophy. Let's say it like that. In a very practical manner, right? I mean, the Institution of the United States, the Constitution, the civil rights movements, and so on and so on. America is remarkably a place where a lot of things got solved. In this sense, okay, the whole American history is a very, if you look at it in correct eyes, it's a very glorious history where the power of the people, the power of the American people has enabled to solve a lot of issues which were previously theoretic. Okay, so here we are dealing with the concept of the rule of the bureaucracy, which is not just theoretical philosophical question in our day and age, but a practical one, okay? A practical one where it comes to the office of the President of the United States, elected by the people.
The public's elected representatives, the President, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. that's the whole point of a democracy. And if you looked at this, if you asked look at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has...
This is a remarkable thing that he's saying. He's saying the modus operandi, the mode of operation of the current form of government that has been developed in the 21st century in America and for sure in other states in the world is no longer aligned with the Constitution of the United States and with the vision of the founding fathers. Okay, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington will not concur with what is currently happening in the American state of affairs, and for sure not with the way things have developed worldwide. Okay, so let's see.
Always currently more power than any elected representative, and this is not something that people want, and it's not. It does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix.
Yes. Okay, so this is very remarkable. Okay, so let's recap. Elon is saying that a certain state bureaucracy has developed into monstrous magnitudes and is a certain parasitic factor within the United States. It is not aligned with the Constitution of the United States, but nevertheless it has tremendous power, okay? Tremendous political power that it imposes, okay? And this is a state of bureaucratic dominance, okay? Now, remarkably, we have thinkers in the 20th century that have actually warned very strongly and predicted that such a process will occur. And that it will be one of the big political challenges of the 21st century. Okay? I will repeat it again. When one is dealing with a problem, it is very advisable and recommended to see if previous thinkers, wise people of the past, have wrote about it, warned about it, discussed it, and maybe thought of solutions about it. Now, why don't we know about such writings if they exist? Okay, so you see, also previous leaders of the past always used books, always used the guidance of previous generations, of the wisdom of previous generations, in order to learn what is recommended for them to do in the present. So why don't we know about such books if they exist? The reason is there are a few reasons, and I will want to mention them before introducing the books themselves. I already mentioned them in the introduction. One of them is The Society of the Spectacle of Debord, and another one is The Social Writings of Baal HaSulam. And I will try to explain why these books are not so famous in this context, okay? So answer number one. Answer number one is that sometimes certain books are ahead of their time. They are ahead of their time, and when they are ahead of their time, then one does not pay too much attention to them until the problems that they solve becomes critical, becomes acute. So, for instance, God forbid, if somebody has some sickness, he goes to a doctor and the doctor heals him. And if the doctor heals him, he becomes for him the biggest hero in the world. But if he will not have the need to consult with this doctor, he might sit with him, I don't know, in lunch or something, and he will look to him just like some ordinary person, right? Because until you need something, you do not necessarily understand its great importance. That is called being ahead of your time. And in this subject, that is, it is not an individual sickness, it is a sickness of society as a whole. We can understand the magnitude of the importance of the things at our day and age. Okay, so if a book discusses and foresees a problem that will become acute, 50, 100 years from the time in which it is written, at the times that in which it is written, it seems minor. It seems like, when and whenever will something like this will be relevant, right? If I would have given you a book about the dangers of automation and AI replacing teachers and workers and truck drivers in the 21st centuries, and I will give it to you 100 years ago, you will laugh at me. It will be considered science fiction, right? So this is answer number one on why these books are not so famous. Answer number two, and this is that we have certain institutions whose role and whose job was to deliver and channel this kind of content to society. One of them is the academy. And the problem with the academy today is not that there is, a humanist academy, progressive academy for thinking, for, that in where you study, lefty propaganda. The problem with the academy is much deeper. And that is that the same institutions that should have been the ones consulting to, Elon Musk, consulting to Trump, are not trustworthy because they themselves have been conquered by the bureaucracy. They themselves have been conquered by exactly this totalitarian bureaucracy and have taken ownership over the interpretation of the books. So what happens is that actually the academy itself has turned into a bureaucratic monster, into actually part of the bureaucratic totalitarianism, and is reading the books in ways that preserves its own rulership. So even though the books exist, technically in a utopian scenario, the academy should have been in the forefront of fighting against the bureaucratic totalitarianism, but it has been conquered by it. So it cannot give you the solutions for the problem, even though it holds them in terms of the books. So philosophy, thinking, social thinking, and so on is not the enemy of freedom, and of course not, right? It needs to be healed back. But the problem is like, it is like the joke. If I would have had $1 million, I would have been a millionaire. You see, it's a certain loop. The solution for the sickness is in the hands of the academy. It is the ones that needs to channel it to the society and so on. But it cannot do it because it is part of the sickness by itself. So the academy does not need to be abolished. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be corrected. So that the contents that we are trying to make here now in a sort of, revolutionary underground YouTube channel would actually be heard and disseminated within the universities themselves. That's what was actually the original role. But it is now like broken channels. Okay, it cannot supply this kind of content. That is why it needs to be done volunteering in YouTube, in underground. I know that Elon Musk is a fan of science fiction, so for sure knows that in one of the Terminators, I don't remember, I think it's Terminator number 3, they are fighting against the robots. They need to broadcast pirate radio broadcasts for the revolution. Okay, so this is answer number 2. The channels, answer number 1 is that a lot of these things were ahead of their time. They couldn't be properly understood until now, the 21st century, that we can start understanding the acute importance of these writings. And the second thing is that the same channels that should have delivered to us this kind of messages, because everybody knows that in our day and age, in the academies, there's a lot of bullshit, right? A lot of bullshit. But the real content that we should have had is exactly this kind of ideas. But these ideas are actually censored in the academy. The academy itself censors them. Okay. And the third reason is when it comes to Baal HaSulam is simply even more remarkable, that these writings that we are discussing has never been published. Okay, it's for all sorts of reasons. The full social writings of Baal HaSulam have only been kept in Xeroxed handwriting and now on PDFs, but they have not so far simply been published. Because again, it was so ahead of his time in the circles where he wrote that amongst all of his manuscripts and published works, this is simply an underground, sort of underground track, but it's quite remarkable, but let's discuss it when we reach it. Okay, so these are the three reasons why this kind of thought is not so well known. Okay, so Guy Debord. Okay, this is Guy Debord, very famous for his book, The Society of the Spectacle. Okay, but look at this remarkable thing. Guy-Ernest Debord was a French Marxist theorist, philosopher, filmmaker, critic of work, member of the Letterist International, founder of a Letterist faction, and founding member of the Situationist International, and so on and so on. Okay, Debord is known for his 1967 essay, The Society of the Spectacle. Okay, so you see already, like I mentioned, it's the famous cover of the book. Like I mentioned, if you will go to the official channels and you will look how a thinker, a philosopher like Guy Debord is presented, you will see a Marxist theorist, a lefty. Okay, very clear, very simple, categorized. Now I'm sure that if Elon Musk, for instance, would see this book and he will ask who wrote this book, and they will tell him, this is a lefty Marxist book. It's a communist Marxist lefty book. So Elon Musk will take it, and I don't know, say I never want to hear from this person again because it's dangerous. Yes, it's communism. I don't want any contact with it, and that is a remarkably good strategy. Okay, how if you have a certain book that is has something to say, if you will label it as communist, if you will label it as a Marxist lefty, then it's the most assured way to make sure that it will never come, I don't know, to the table of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, right? And for many other people. So you see, assuming that it's true, then okay, fine. But what if it's not true? Yeah, what if Guy Debord is not exactly a classic Marxist communist lefty? Okay, what if he is something else? Okay, and that is what I want to try to show you today, because you see, the ones that have the power to label things, to describe what they have a lot of power, especially if they are will present the ones that oppose them strongest as being part of their membership. You see, the current academy today, they are the ones that are making these labels. Okay, so they, for instance, can label Spinoza as an atheist. They can label Immanuel Kant as somebody that has disproved God, as a complete atheist. And again, we're not going here into theological discussions. This is a whole subject by itself. But they can label Debord as a symbol of communism and leftism and so on. And by this, make sure that a lot of his ideas and thoughts will actually not be delivered to the audience to which it was written. Okay? Now, when you go to academic courses, to discussions, the official discussions about Guy Debord, usually you will hear something like, Guy Debord is very relevant to the 21st century because he has anticipated the Instagram social media generations in which we are completely engulfed in spectacles, right? We're constantly sharing where we've been, where we were, and sometimes it's completely illusionary, right? People are making pictures of themselves with jet planes and with whatever they eat in luxury hotels, and sometimes it's absolutely not true. And today with the age of AI and so on and so on, Guy Debord was sort of a prophet about that, about the against the ultra-capitalistic society of the spectacle, right? And he was a devoted Marxist, devoted lefty that was against all of this worship of the spectacular, of reality TV and so on. Yeah. How not to? Because there's a huge difference between reading books, actually reading what is written in a book, and getting it through auxiliary channels. Okay, so you know what? Let me give you an example. Okay, I will show you a channel that I actually quite like. Okay, I will quite like. I hope that this is what will come out on the search, because you see the broadcast that we are making are very spontaneous. They are spontaneous because sadly it is very underground broadcasts. Let's see something about the Society of the Spectacle. Let's see, maybe they done something about it. Yeah. Let's try. Sorry. Let's try that. Yeah. So many commercials, right? Spectacular. Okay, so disclaimer, I really like this channel. It's a great channel. Plastic Pills, usually very good. Also here, very, very good. But again, it will only show you a facet of the ideas.
In a world that is really upside down, the true is a moment of the false. Starting like that feels kind of rote. You know, the sort of vague quotation at the beginning that doesn't really add any interest that wasn't already there, but gives a veneer of credibility because of its obscurity. In any case, you and I are doing spectacle right now.
Okay, so I just want to explain. That's really, he touched on a very important word here, key word here, obscurity. The problem with these books is that they are not easy to read. And therefore, when they are channeled, when I don't know, you go to a course in the university and the professor teaches you, I don't know, Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord, okay? Then by selectively showing you only parts, you can really create a certain interpretation of the book that is very selective, okay? It can show it, and a lot of philosophy books are like that, right? So it's very, very dangerous on the hands of who the right to interpret is deposited, right? Because even just by selective reading, you can create a certain understanding of the books that is radically different one from the other.
See a few ads about Jesus.
Spectacle. 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 Okay, the spectacle is a neo-Marxist concept.
Take the green pill and become an Eagles fan.
Spooky. The spectacle is a consensual hallucination, like a waking dream. And there are about 5 different definitions of it in this book and 5 more in the second one. But let's start with this one. The spectacle is not a collection of images. It's a social relation between people that is mediated by images. That means us. Our relationship.
Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is that you see when you go to the official channels about Because you see, we are lefties within the lefty. We are revolutionaries within the revolutionary camp. Right? So, so when you go to the official institutionalized progressive lefty channels, then they will, of course, present to you that Guy Debord is against the capitalist spectacular way of living, and as a neo-Marxist, he criticizes. What is the remarkable thing? The remarkable thing is that once you actually read the Society of the Spectacle, you see something very remarkable. That Guy Debord is turning the crux of his criticism not necessarily against the, capitalist America, but actually against Marxism itself. Okay? Against Marxism itself. Guy Debord is not a neo-Marxist. He is an anti-Marxist, anti-Leninist, anti-Stalinist. Okay? And that is something that the lefty forces to be don't want you to know. They don't really want you to read the Society of the Spectacle, because the biggest criticism in Society of the Spectacle is against communism. Okay? The most charged part of the Society of the Spectacle is actually against the lefty communism. And he has conducted, actually, at one of the heights of the Soviet Empire, in 1967, he has conducted one of the biggest criticism against it, against Leninism, against Stalinism, and this is hidden within the pages of his book. And what he actually said is that the Communist Party is a spectacle of a revolutionary. A spectacle of a revolution. And this, of course, nobody will tell you. You will not go to the lefty communist and neo-Marxists that currently hold the right to interpret his book, and hear from them that it actually contains a stark criticism of communism itself. Because you see, who holds the book of Society of the Spectacle? Usually communists, right? And liberals, ultra-liberals like Elon Musk, are they interested in what Guy Debord has to say? Nothing. So it's the brilliant plan. Undo the criticism by taking power over the one who said it, recruiting him to your camp. Guy Debord is dead. He cannot object it anymore, right? So what is he saying? What is his criticism? His criticism is remarkable. He goes into a very deep, because you see, we use the word obscure on the one hand, but on the other hand, it is not obscurity for the sake of obscurity. Some people think that philosophy books are written obscurity for the sake of obscurity. It's not true. It is very deep, okay? It's a deep thinker. And sometimes deep thinkers, people that are very brilliant, they don't see that the public, the audience, is very far away from what they are expressing. They expect the society, right, to understand what they are saying naturally, and sometimes the gap is very big, because you see he goes into a very deep analysis of how actually Karl Marx grew out and was heavily influenced by previous philosophers, mainly Hegel, and how the Marxist theory was born from a certain utopian worldview of Hegel, and he says Marx was actually very bounded in his way of thinking to Hegel, and from Marx came out the other revolutionaries that tried to apply his theory, but they applied it in a false way. And they, according to, and also, not just that they applied it in a false way, he doesn't think that there is like, definitely not. A lot of communists will come and tell you, oh, Marx was simply misunderstood. But if there would have been true Marxism and true communism, then everything would have been great. It's just the people that tried to apply Marx did not understood him or made false communism. But Marx is good, Marx is okay. Debord does not think like that. Definitely not. Debord understands that there is deep problems with Marx, deep philosophical problems with Marx. But never mind this now. Okay? So what is he actually saying? His criticism is remarkable because it's not what you hear in the university. What Debord is actually arguing is that Marxism and the Bolshevik revolutions that followed it actually gave rise and birth to a completely new class. There's no longer just the proletariat and the proletarian and the capitalists, the owners of wealth and so on. There is now a new class, an invisible class. And this invisible class, he says that the Russian Bolshevik Revolution has given birth to a new class. And this new class is the bureaucratic totalitarianism. The same one that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are facing today in the United States, and is actually a global problem. Okay? Remarkable. And what does he say that this class has given birth to? Amongst other things, a spectacle of a revolution. And this is something you will never hear in the academy. Nobody will touch this chapter of the Society of the Spectacle, because you think that a communist or a neo-Marxist or whatever, somebody that identified with the spectacle of the Society of the Spectacle in the way that it is presented in the academy, will dare say that Debord is actually criticizing the Marxism itself, that saying that the Bolshevik Revolution is a spectacle, is an ultimate spectacle. It itself is a spectacle, not Instagram and reality TV and commercials on the television and so on. The ultimate spectacle is the Bolshevik Revolution itself. And it has created a lie in which the revolution is actually is actually a disguise, a spectacle for a bureaucratic rulership. So the same bureaucratic rulership that has developed spontaneously or not spontaneously within the United States is actually a part of the, how would you say this, virus, right? The virus that has been discovered in the process of the Bolshevik Revolution. The bureaucratic totalitarianism. Okay? So, in the days of Lenin, in the days of Stalin, society has discovered, a part of society, a part of the human society has discovered this instrument of power called the bureaucracy. The special type of bureaucracy that has been developed as a spectacular bureaucracy within the Soviet Empire. And this bureaucracy, not as an ideology, but as a form of power, has been multiplied and disseminated as really as a sort of an organism into Western society as well. Into Western society as well, as a class, as a ruling invisible class. It's not a conspiracy. It is a really scientific issue. Okay, it's an almost scientific issue. Okay, so let's read a bit from Debord, from the Society of the Spectacle itself. You see, it's funny because the website that I'm using is by itself a Marxist website. Okay, so you see, you can, Marxist.org. So if you want enter Debord's writings on the internet, this is the kind of banner you need to pass. So I think in this point immediately readers like Donald Trump and Elon Musk will not enter something like this, right? So luckily for us, we are here in the underground. And let's see. Okay, so let me show you some quotes from Debord. Remarkable quotes. Let's see, it starts from 100, so let's... One thing that makes this book very easy to read is that it is divided into sort of very short chapters, snippets. So every one is like a mini quote. The historical moment when Bolshevism triumphed for itself in Russia, and when social democracy fought victoriously for the whole world, marks the inauguration of the state of affairs, which is at the heart of the domination of the modern spectacle. The representation of the working class radically opposes itself to the working class. Okay? So it says the biggest spectacle are the Bolsheviks. They have created, they have actually given birth to the spectacle. Because everybody knows that the ones that represent the social class are its biggest enemies. The ones that represent the working class are its biggest enemies. Everybody knows that Lenin and Stalin, they are the representatives of the working class. But it's a spectacle. Stalin did not went working in a Soviet kolkhoz, right? In Siberia. He lived okay, right? So the historical moment when Bolshevism triumphed for itself in Russia, and so on, marks the inauguration of the state of affairs, which is at the heart of the domination of the modern spectacle. The representation of the working class radically opposes itself to the working class. So again, you see, Instagram is not the problem with the society of the spectacle. It's not what gave birth to the society of the spectacle. When you see a Coca-Cola commercial, this is not the society of the spectacle. Bolshevism is the society of the spectacle. Who will tell you this in a course in the university about Debord? Luckily, we can do this here in the underground. Okay. The revolutionary underground against the revolution. Okay, let's see some more quotes. It's not the typical quotes you see about Debord. All right? Let's see some more. Okay, let's see in 101. The spectacular organization of defense of the existing order, the social reign of appearances, where no central question can any longer be posed openly and honestly. The revolutionary representation of the proletariat had at this stage become both the main factor and the central result of the general falsification of society. Okay, so he says something very interesting, because you see, it's a quote from Rosa Luxemburg. It revolves on a quote from Rosa Luxemburg in 1988, and he says, actually, you can't completely blame the Bolsheviks, the communist revolution, because this sickness started a bit before. They inherited this. Because what happened is that when the Bolsheviks tried to do the revolution, and originally maybe there was some grain of true ideology there, maybe, right? But when they went against the Tsarist society in 1988, in 1918 and so on, 1917, they discovered that there is actually the power of the Tsar, the power of the rulers in Russia, did not come necessarily just from the Tsar itself, and I don't know, his generals, his army, and so on. There was a sort of an invisible class where the rulership was practiced in a sort of a spectacular way. Yeah, appearances. And sort of the Russian Bolsheviks inherited this from the previous rulership, but they have escalated this sickness to unbelievable proportions. They are really the ones that discovered the true and full power of bureaucracy as a ruling class. Again, bureaucracy as a ruling class. The concept of bureaucracy as a ruling class, according to Debord, was developed in Russia. Okay, let's read some more in 102. Okay, so again, I apologize that it's a bit spontaneous, right? Because we don't, if it would have been, a course in Harvard or Princeton on this subject, we would have time to bring out all the quotes in an organized fashion and so on. But it's voluntary, so that's the way it looks like. Okay. The continuing retreat of the mass of the European workers' movement in the face of the Hic Salta of the 1918-1920 period, a retreat which included the violent destruction of its radical minority, favored the completion of the Bolshevik development, and let this fraudulent outcome present itself to the world as the only proletarian solution. By seizing state monopoly over representation and defense of workers' power, the Bolshevik Party justified itself and became what it was, the party of the proprietors of the proletariat, essentially eliminating earlier forms of property. So what is he actually saying? He's saying that this bureaucratic totalitarianism is a parasitic entity. It's a parasitic entity by the fact that it takes ownership of representations. There is the workers. The workers have some political aspirations. They want better conditions. They want, communist revolution, whatever kind of things they want. We are the representatives. And as the representatives, their political power becomes our political power. And by so, they become political parasites. Okay? In America, we see it very well today. The same methods, right? There is the LGBTQ community. This LGBT community now needs representation. It needs a patron. It needs somebody that will be its face, its Lenin, its Stalin, whatever. So the forces to be, the political forces to be, are actually adopting the LGBTQ community. They are adopting the black community. They are adopting all sorts of minors that they are now the ones representing. Okay? They recruit supposedly these fractions of society into the party. Okay? Okay. And now we're coming closer and closer to the quotes that are relevant to us. The debate was resolved in practice by means of a factor which had not been present in the hypothesis. Okay, so what he's telling us is that when the Bolshevik revolution, the Bolshevik Marxist-Leninist revolution occurred, the Leninists and the Marxists discovered a class that did not exist in theory. When you read Marx Capital and the Bolshevik, the Communist Manifesto and so on, there's only two classes, right? Proletariat and the capitalists. And in practice, the Bolsheviks have discovered a third class that did not appear in the theory. A revolutionary bureaucracy. Okay? A revolutionary bureaucracy which directed the proletariat seized state power and gave society a new class domination. And what happened in practice? What happened in practice is that the workers assumed that when they will make their revolution, they will take the rulership from the hands of the Tsar, they will take the power from the hand of the capitalists, the landowners, the money owners, the tycoons or whatever, the rich, and they will rule. And what did they discover? That they have replaced one dictatorship by another. Instead of being their own masters, they are now the slaves instead of the Tsar, of the bureaucracy. Because the class of the bureaucracy was an unexpected discovery within the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay? A class that was not there before. What is so difficult with this class is that the bureaucracy, contrary to the Tsar, is an invisible class. And that is what makes opposition to the bureaucracy a much more complicated matter than opposing, for instance, Hitler or the Tsar or any kind of dictator. Okay? That is also one of the reasons why eventually the Soviet Union fell. Because the Soviet Union, even though it was a bureaucratic empire, at the end, he explains, Debord actually explained, it needed a certain spectacular figure. It did not resolve itself into complete anonymity, because at the end there was a head figure, like, I don't know, like Stalin or Boris Yeltsin or Gorbachev or Lenin or something like this, that was the head figure. They were not a completely anonymic bureaucracy, semi-anonymic, but at the end they did have a dictator on top. That is also one of the reasons eventually it fell. The ultra-modern, post-modern bureaucracies that currently exist in the United States is a completely faceless bureaucracy, and that is one of the things that makes it very complicated to deal with. But Debord will also explain the source of power of this faceless, spectacular bureaucracy. Okay? I find it quite remarkable. Yeah? Strictly bourgeois revolution had been impossible. The democratic dictatorship of workers and peasants was meaningless. The proletarian power of the Soviets could not maintain itself simultaneously against the class of small landowners, against the national and international white reaction, and against its own representation, externalized and alienated in the form of the Workers' Party of absolute masters of state economy, expression, and soon of thought. Okay? So, the development of the bureaucracy, invented in Soviet Russia and imported currently to the United States in its more violent and powerful expression. Just a moment. A new class domination. Again, look at this. This theory became true only after the introduction of the unknown factor. Yeah, the theory of the permanent revolution. The class power of the bureaucracy. Okay, the class power of the bureaucracy, born in Soviet Russia. In the numerous arguments among the Bolshevik directors, Lenin was the most consistent defender of the concentration of dictatorial power in the hands of the supreme representatives of ideology. Lenin was right every time against his adversaries in that he supported the solution implied by earlier choices of absolute minority power. So you see, this concept does not exist. Well, again, Debord does not say that Marx is correct, definitely not. But it does not exist in Marx. Marx did not anticipate the development of a class of the supreme representatives of ideology. But in practice, when Lenin came, he invented this new concept within communism. Marx never spoke that at the end of the communist revolution they will develop such a class of high priests of the revolution, right? But yet it developed. The democracy and that's the idea of Lenin, right? The democracy which was kept from peasants by means of the state would have to be kept from the workers as well, which led to keeping it from communist leaders of unions, from the entire party, and finally from the leading party bureaucrats. So you see, the bureaucracy develops in order to actually undo any kind of revolution. It is an ideology according to which democracy needs to be kept from the people in any way. So if in the past the power was kept from the people by the state, now you need to keep democracy away from the workers by the bureaucrats. So the bureaucrats in society function as a certain social elite, which are supposedly the high priests, that they are the ones that are keeping democracy from the people. In order to sort of like, they are not responsible enough to have democracy. We are the ones that should regulate what democracy really means. In the United States, it's in the form of high judges, of bureaucrats, and so on, judges of sorts. Also, in other states, we have this, where there develops a high priesthood, a priesthood of unelected elite class, which are not the elite in the sense of, I don't know, Rothschild, Rockefellers, this kind of primitive Marxist view that the elite are the owners of wealth. The new elite own actually not so much wealth at all. But what they own is the spectacle. What they own is the illusion of authority, as a class, as an invisible class of the responsible adults in society. And they are enforcing this illusion, this spectacle, by a certain communal hallucination, in which the abused are hallucinating together with their abusers together, that this elite class of priesthood within society is really the representatives of the responsible voice of what democracy really is. We know what we are the representation of democracy. We are the representation of the law. We tell you what the law says. We tell you what democracy is. And this is very powerful. When one person does it, it's not so powerful. But when you have a whole class within society that are dominating the legal systems, they are dominating the media, they are dominating the universities. Each one by himself is very non-convincing. But when they come together, they form a certain priesthood, bureaucratic priesthood within society. And this society by itself, each one of its atoms, is not powerful at all. On the contrary, it is an invisible dictatorship, because each one of the atoms of the people taking part of this bureaucratic illusion is by itself powerless. But the power is created between all of them together. And this is the dangerous mutation of the current postmodern 21st century bureaucracies that even the Soviets did not manage to create. Because at the end, the Soviets did need to put a figurehead on top, like Stalin. In the postmodern the bureaucracy in the United States currently, there's no figurehead. It is each one of the atoms of the bureaucracy is completely powerless. There's no dictator. There's just a mode of thought, a certain bureaucratic religion. And therefore, it is very hard to go against it because you have no specific figure to go. The power is invisible. You understand? They have created an invisible concentration of power. Thomas Hobbes has a very nice image that he gives in a different context. But yes, he gives it in terms of describing social insanity. And he says sometimes society develops mental illness. And this mental illness is very hard to deal with. Why? Because societies that are mentally ill by themselves, it's like he gives an equation to the harsh sea, a sea that is stormy, is very stormy weather. So he says the waves can kill you. The waves, in general, are very dangerous. But if you will take one drop of water from the sea and put it in a cup, it will be completely fine. This will not be dangerous at all, right? The water would sit still. But when you will bring it back to the sea, it will rage. The same thing with society. The society of the bureaucratic dictatorship is very much similar to this, because the power is distributed between them in a way in which you cannot really, once you take a specific bureaucrat out, what power does he have? It's just, I don't know, some media reporter, but some news reporter. Okay, just reports the news. It doesn't say anything by himself, right? Or if you will take some university professor, okay, so he has this opinion or that opinion, but what can you do about it? Or you will take some judge, or you will take some lawyer or whatever. By themselves, you cannot criticize them because they have no individual power. And that's the danger of bureaucracy, of the bureaucratic dictatorship, because it's a dictatorship without a dictator. Let's see a bit more. So you see again, you will never hear this kind of criticism in the university, in the academy. You will never hear this, because it goes against their mode of power. They will not say that. The bureaucratic society, you see, the real society of the spectacle is not Instagram. It's the bureaucratic Bolshevik, ultra-Bolshevik mutation that is now spread to the whole world. Discovered in Soviet Russia and imported to the whole world. The bureaucratic society continued the consolidation by terrorizing the peasantry in order to implement the mass brutal, primitive, capitalist, the most actually, it's a typo here, the most brutal, primitive capitalist accumulation in history. So he says, at the end of the day, in Hebrew we have a term that people run from a small fire to a big fire. What happened with the society, the worker society, or the nation, the people of the state in Russia, is that sadly so they were deceived to run from a small fire to a big fire. They thought that they will take down the Tsar and they will have liberty and communism and whatever. And actually, they have given rise to a complete juggernaut, a monster of the bureaucratic class that has enslaved them more than the Tsar ever did. The biggest accumulation, capitalist accumulation ever. So the spectacular entity of the Soviet Empire disguised itself as a spectacle of the representative of the workers, of the proletariat, but actually was the biggest capitalist ever in history. You see the paradox? So the Debord is actually saying that the biggest spectacle in history was the spectacle of the Soviet Revolution. Everybody knew. Under the hood, it was a complete accumulation of the wealth of the nations that even the Tsar could not do even a tiny bit of. But it disguised itself nevertheless as the representative of the workers. The industrialization of the Stalin epoch revealed the reality behind the bureaucracy, the continuation of the power of the economy and the preservation of the essence of the market society commodity labor. The independent economy which dominates society to the extent of reinstituting the class domination it needs for its own ends is thus confirmed. So at the end of the day, what Debord is saying is that there is a certain power within human society itself that Marx did not foresaw. It's a mistake in all of Marxist theory that gives birth to class domination. It doesn't matter how you will roll the dice. It doesn't matter what kind of ism you will put at the end. There is something much deeper than the, historical development of the economic system like Marx identified it, that will eventually always lead, unless fixed, to class domination. And the Bolsheviks have proven this by developing their bureaucracy, which was actually one of the worst forms of class domination in the world. Only that there is no longer the capitalist, there is the bureaucrats. Which is to say that the bourgeois created an autonomous power which, so long as it autonomously lasts, can even do without a bourgeois. Okay? The totalitarian bureaucracy is not the last owning class in history, in the sense of Brunner-Risi. It is only a substitute ruling class for the commodity economy. Okay? So again, they own nothing. But there is a certain force within society that by itself that animates this from within. Animates the existence of this class from within. Even if they by themselves don't hold any substantial wealth. Okay, so I don't know. Hillary Clinton stole a few millions of dollars, and Bernie Sanders stole a few millions of dollars. But come on, they're not tycoons. They're still just bureaucrats. But the economy itself, the something within the human state, gives rise to these forms of power that animates the existence of such classes, such totalitarian classes, and recruits them into existence from within. Capitalist private property in decline is replaced by a simplified, less diversified surrogate, which is condensed as a collective property of the bureaucratic class. It's unbelievable. He says, actually, the communist revolution actually damaged society. It has primitivized the ruling class that before the communist revolution, the ruling class was a bit more developed. Now, the communists destroyed the Tsar, they took him down, and it is now replaced by a more primitive state. The bureaucrats are more primitive than the monarchs of the past, in the sense that they don't even hold wealth. And you can see it very well. I actually read the book The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, that he starts in the 80s already discussing this. And he explains the politicians are the worst managers in the world, because they never held money in their hands. They don't know how to deal even with money. They don't know any kind of productive thing. The Tsar, at least, or the monarchs of the past, had a treasury. They had something that directly affected whether they will have a feast on their table or not. The bureaucrats are even more primitive than that. But what they do protect is the accumulation of the common wealth between them. So each one of the bureaucrats by itself is not wealthy, but together they hold power. And this is what they protect. But it is very primitive motivation for the protection of power. Remarkable. This underdeveloped ruling class, retarded ruling class, it says it's the most primitive ruling class in history, is the expression of economic underdevelopment and has no perspective either other than to overcome the retardation of this development in certain regions of the world. Okay, so what does he mean by that? Look at the bureaucrats today. What are they fighting over? What is the thing that unites them all? Because they know that the average person in society that is not part of their sect, that is not part of their cult, cannot even get his necessities in society. He will need to work 3-4 jobs in order to finance his family, and most likely will not be able even to have one. But if you are part of the sect, you will maybe be able to come through. So this is the sign of the most underdeveloped economy in history, because the bureaucrats are coming together in order to fight the retardation of the complete retardation of economy that they themselves brought to. Because they know, if I will not be part of the sect, I will be thrown completely to the streets. So I must be part of the sect, of the bureaucratic sect. I must somehow recruit myself into it. And then the ones that are part of the sect, they can get along a bit better. But all are fighting just for scrapes and bits and pieces of remains from something that could have been much better wealth. There were times in medieval society that an average peasant had more than a bureaucrat in our time today. The most primitive economy ever. Let's read a bit more. Just a moment. Yeah. Again, you see, it's unbelievable, because once you see it all and you see what strong criticism actually Guy Debord has towards communism, you understand what a spectacle the academy is doing in the way that they present his thought. It's completely censored. Why? Do you think the bureaucrats want you to know, to come to the uni and learn how the power really works? You see why there is so much attention directed to the university, to the academy? Because they control tremendous amount of power on the way that they disseminate knowledge to society. This needs to be fixed. The totalitarian ideological class in power is the power of a topsy-turvy world. The stranger it is, the more it claims not to exist, and its force serves above all to affirm its non-existence. So you see, this class, the bureaucratic class, the class in power, what is its most important objective to continue to remain, in order to continue to remain in power, is to affirm its non-existence. Every kind of implication that there is a bureaucratic sect ruling class is labeled conspiracy, right? If you will try to hint that there is something incorrect in the way in which power is distributed within our current so-called democratic societies, you are considered a conspiracy theorist. Until not long ago, Elon Musk was considered a conspiracy theorist, right? Because his conspiracy is against the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy does not exist. There's no ruling class, right? And it is to such an extent that to a certain extent it is true. Because if you will ask any bureaucrat, if he is part of the ruling class, he will laugh at you, will tell you it's preposterous. I'm just an ordinary person doing my job. And it is so tremendously remarkable that the camouflage is so successful that the people that are part of the ruling class actually believe that they do not exist. If you will go to a judge, he truly, truly believes that he has no special power. He is doing only his job in the completely loyal and respectable manner. And that's the genius thing in this primitive organism. You know, not long ago, I had the opportunity to see the Sophocles play, King Oedipus, right? And it's remarkable because this masterpiece is built in such a way that Oedipus gradually understands that he is the impurity. He's a hero. He views himself as a completely heroic leader. And gradually, as the play develops, understand the plot that he himself is the most corrupt, is the corruption of the state. And it unfolds slowly, gradually, the realization of his own corruption. That he is the most corrupt part of the state. So the camouflage of power is so remarkable that the bureaucratic society by itself the bureaucratic class does not see that it is a class. It's so invisible. There is no Lenin, there is no Stalin in the modern bureaucracy. There is no Hitler. The bureaucracy is so invisible that it is invisible from its own self. It claims not to exist. It is modest only on this point, because its official non-existence must also coincide with the nec plus ultra of historical development, which must at the same time be attributed to its infallible command. So on the one hand, it is modest. On the other hand, like a serial killer, right? It needs to flaunt its achievements. So it's seen, but it declares that it does not exist. The invisible rulership. Extended everywhere, the bureaucracy must be the class invisible to consciousness. As a result, all social life becomes insane. The social organization of the absolute lie flows from this fundamental contradiction. So you see, the bureaucracy is the ultimate spectacle. This is the society of the spectacle. The society of the spectacle is not because you share some post on Instagram or watch a reality television show. The society of the spectacle is the non-existence of the bureaucracy, and it has been born from the Bolshevik Revolution and disseminated worldwide, including in the United States. Because you see, the Americans, were very concerned from a Marxist communist revolution. You know, the McCarthy and so on, they were very, very careful that there would not be revolutionary factors, communists, holding the Marxist, the Communist Manifesto in their hands. And in this they succeeded. But they did not foresaw the real threat of the way communism has mutated into forming the bureaucratic totalitarianism. And in this they failed completely in being conquered by this virus. And only now they realize it. And there is solutions for that. But maybe if they would have read Guy Debord, they would have understood it better already in the 60s. But they would not have read Guy Debord because Guy Debord was taken hostage by the communists themselves, by the bureaucrats themselves, actually, more correctly so. Remarkable, right? Stalinism was the reign of terror within the bureaucratic class itself. The terrorism at the base of this class power must also strike this class because it possesses no judicial guarantee, no recognized existence as owing class, which it could extend to every one of its members. So you see, the bureaucratic totalitarianism rules through terror. It has no other means of rulership. It rules through insanity and terror because it must reinforce its rulership through fear, including within bureaucracy itself. You see, somebody that is part of this sect cannot step out. It's like the mafia. He cannot step out. Because if you will step out from it, there is the constant fear that if you will not do the wishes of the sect, of the bureaucratic class, then you will be out, you will be marked, and then you will be out, and you will not have your share. And that is actually the mutation that it mutated at this time of Stalin. False consciousness can maintain its absolute power only by means of absolute terror, where all real motives are ultimately lost. There is no other motivation than the fear and terror that the bureaucratic class infuses into society, including also into itself. The members of the bureaucratic class in power have a right of ownership over society only collectively, as participants in a fundamental lie. You see, again, the bureaucrats themselves, this ruling class, have no power by their own individually. They only conspire together to create a certain brainwash, a certain collective lie that if they step out from, they are thrown out from heaven, right? They are cast away. Because the exact point is that their power comes from their collective power. And therefore, if something threatens their collective, he is a threat against all. No criticism is allowed in the bureaucratic class. Because it is communal, they have to play the role of the proletariat directing a socialist society. They have to be actors loyal to a script of ideological disloyalty. But effective participation in this falsehood requires that it be recognized as actual participation. No bureaucrat can support his right to power individually, since proving that he's a socialist proletarian would mean presenting himself as the opposite of a bureaucrat, and proving that he is a bureaucrat is impossible since the official truth of the bureaucracy is that it does not exist. Thus, every bureaucrat depends absolutely on the central guarantee of the ideology which recognizes the collective participation in its socialist power. Of all the bureaucrats, it does not annihilate. Okay, so again, the participation in the bureaucratic class is part of taking part of a spectacle of having no power whatsoever. Any news reporter by himself is just a news reporter. He just reads what is being told. A judge judges according to the law. A bureaucrat just does what is written in the book, right? But together they form a power. If ever a news reporter will want to report something that is not scripted, he will be cast away. If an academic professor will want to teach something that is not scripted, he will be cast away. So the way in which the bureaucratic class rules is by their ability to cast one away from their society of the spectacle. But it's all just a spectacle. It's all illusionary power. It's not real power, just a spectacle. Remarkable. Do you think anybody in the uni will come and tell you this in the academy? No. Anyway, this podcast is now quite long already, but I wanted to present to you how these ideas actually are already expressed in another collection of social writings that predates Guy Debord by many years. Not so many, but many years. Let's say, maybe 20 years before. So, Debord wrote Society of the Spectacle in 1967. And we, if you will see in our channel, the channel is mainly devoted for discussing writings of a very specific rabbi. And the rabbis that we follow is called Baal HaSulam. Okay, let me show you. Okay, this is Rabbi Yehuda Alevi Ashlag, okay, of blessed memory. He was born in 1885. He passed away in 1954. Okay, and he was active mainly here in Israel. He was born in Poland, and he was active mainly in Israel. He was very, very profound thinker. Okay, he's known as a Kabbalist. He's known, which is, I don't like so much to use this word Kabbalah because it has very mystical connotations. But Baal HaSulam remarkably was a very deep social thinker, and to a large extent, his message is more universal than strictly, let's say, Jewish. Okay, so his thinking and his social thinking is very universal. Okay, and also him, like Guy Debord to a certain extent, is often labeled as communist, as anarchist, as a socialist thinker, and so on. And again, everything I said about Guy Debord applies also to Baal HaSulam. The best way to make sure that nobody would listen to what you have to say about social matters is to label somebody as a socialist. Okay, even though he by himself objected to this title and so on. But if you have very simple categories and you label something in simple categories, it's the easiest for everybody, especially if the real category in which something is found is not convenient to anybody. But you see, Guy Debord was way ahead of his time. You couldn't even understand that he's anti-Marxist and anti-communist because there was no such category before, you know. In the 90s, there were record labels, and you used to go to the record shop, and everything was, I don't know, rock and roll, heavy metal, hip hop. There was this category, dance music, and everything that didn't fit into any category. It was like in the back of the shop where all the geeks went. There was indie music and alternative music, and everything was labeled alternative. Everything that didn't fit into these categories was like alternative music, right? So, Baal HaSulam wrote many things. Very, very varied thinker, and he wrote his big books are commentaries on the central books of Kabbalah, like for instance the Tree of Life of the Arizal and the Book of Zohar and so on. But one of the remarkable bodies of work that he left for us is his social writings. Now, in his lifetime, it was known that the social writings are just 3 not so long papers, essays that he wrote and disseminated in all throughout Israel. Okay, definitely not just to religious people, not just to Orthodox people, not just to people that are of the religious population, but actually, remarkably, he went to kibbutzim, he went to secular to disseminate these writings all over Israel. And this is something very unusual, because typically rabbis, for various reasons, typically write to a religious audience. And for a rabbi, especially of the likes of Baal HaSulam, to write to such a huge audience is quite remarkable. And his concern was about the social matters. He explained that society, and Israel in particular, the Israeli society in particular, by the way, he advocated for coexistence between Jews and Arabs. But this is a matter by itself, and don't want to discuss this. But he advocated for complete harmony within human society and equality. And he says that society as a whole, and Israel in particular, in the 20th and 21st century, if there will not be a deep change, a deep social change in the way in which we view society, will come into a crisis. And this is very, very clearly expressed in his social writings as we knew them in his lifetime. So in his lifetime, he literally owned a newspaper for a very short time, in which he disseminated 3, 4, 5 essays, something like this. Okay, and the main essays are called the essay of liberty, the essay of the giving of the Torah, the essay of mutual guarantee, and so on. And this is what was known. Remarkably, in our day and age, that we have social media, we have the internet, and so on, it was discovered that there were further manuscripts written in his time, but never published. So it's the unpublished social manuscripts of Baal HaSulam. And remarkably, when we read them, things that were already written in the 40s, when Stalin was in his peak, okay, mind you, Debord wrote his criticism of communism in the close to the 70s, 1967. Baal HaSulam expresses very similar ideas about the development of society as it will flow from the communist revolution. And very similar warnings. He actually warns that the communist revolution will develop a class of a bureaucratic dictatorship. And that this class will have the potential of enslaving society in ways that have never been before. He writes it. And again, this social writings, these social essays have never been published. Actually, until today, they can only be found in PDF files on the internet, and has never been properly published, because they're very hard. You see, it's not clear who the audience is, because you see, hardly Guy Debord has proper audience. So on top of this, bringing social writings of a Kabbalist written in Hebrew would be very hard to find a proper audience for that. And clearly, also the Hasidim, the official students of Baal HaSulam, it's not exactly within the framework to concentrate on this kind of writings, right? So it really fell between the chairs until today. And as I mentioned earlier, it was ahead of its time. But in our day and age, this is a question that concerns the current administration of the United States. It is on the table of Donald J. Trump, President Donald J. Trump, and Elon Musk, already these concerns. So, what an interesting twist of events, right? Because you see, I think the students of Baal HaSulam, they never published it because I really think they thought that it will have no really audience. Let me read you some quotes from these writings, and you will see how remarkably similar it is to what Debord is saying. But Baal HaSulam actually says something a bit further. He doesn't just identify the sickness that will evolve, and mind you, already in the 40s, to the sickness that we are experiencing today. He also identifies the root causes, not just the symptoms that will develop, but also some solutions. Okay? He actually identifies what is this force that animates the existence of ruling classes, including bureaucratic classes within society. And he explains that this force is a certain type of will that is imprinted into human society and will eventually give birth in any way and configuration that you will arrange human society for some sort of ruling sect, ruling class within society. And unless this core type of will be addressed and properly handled by society itself, meaning that we will evolve to understand the depth of the human will, we will never be able to solve the problem of the ruling classes. In any kind of configuration of societies, they will develop such ruling class, and it will be inevitable, and no kind of revolution, external revolution like Marx or like Lenin or Stalin or whatever will try to do, will be able to solve this. Okay? So in a certain way, in a non-mystical way, he said that the problem of the existence of ruling classes and bureaucratic dictatorships and so on is the result of a spiritual crisis within society. And by spiritual, by no means mean mystical. I mean, it's not an external economic or political question. It is a question of the inherent state of the human existence. And therefore, it must be directed in the core. Okay, and of course, if you don't have solutions for this, then clearly it's better not to touch it. But if there is some sort of ideology, of some sort of method of philosophical method, conceptual method, to identify and discuss these situations, then it is the only solution. Okay, but let's read a bit from his writings. He said he want, if in summary, let's say like that, he is implying that the human nature has only two ends. He can function only within two categories of existence. One, complete egoism, and the other one is communal altruism. And by communal altruism, by no means does he mean communism. He means a state of thought and of consciousness within human society itself. In a certain sense, sometimes you can hear very big, billionaires that are expressing and are expressing a will that is very altruistic. Sometimes when I listen to speeches of Donald Trump, I listen to Elon Musk, and you can hear that these people truly care. They are altruists. And sometimes a lot of the criticism against them is because the people that criticize them, they say, these billionaires, who are they? But what bothers their ear is not that they are exploitive capitalists that, want to take control over the world wealth, but because it is altruism. So you see, when we are talking about communal altruism, we do not mean communism. Trump could be an altruist communal person, even though he's a very wealthy person. The same goes for Elon Musk. So it's a tricky terminology. But let me selectively try to read you some quotes from the social writings of Baal HaSulam, and hopefully they will be published soon in a proper manner But again, very, very hard. He writes, for instance, like this. These industrious ones, whether willingly or unwillingly, Baal HaSulam describes what will happen within the Soviet society. In the 40s, he says these industrious ones, whether willingly or unwillingly, for the sake of maintaining the state, will be forced to enslave and exploit the laborers without pity and without shame. Exactly what Guy Debord says. That, again, the quote from Baal HaSulam is that the industrious within the Bolshevik revolution will eventually, willingly or unwillingly, in order to maintain the state, will be forced to enslave and exploit the laborers without pity and without shame. So, Bolshevik revolution, Baal HaSulam argued, will give birth to a bureaucratic class of rulership. Similar to the identification of Debord. Okay, again, the Soviet system, Baal HaSulam said already in the 40s, must rely on an overwhelming number of supervisors and enforcers, whose only job is to ensure that workers meet their quotas through fear, through terror, like Debord says. The laborer is more enslaved than under capitalism, for he is neither recourse nor the right to strike. He says, even if today's communist rulers are idealists, there is no guarantee that their children will follow in their ways. The people, in their selfishness, will elect rulers which match their desire. The system will either revert to capitalism or become a national communism of masters and slaves. Okay, again, Baal HaSulam anticipated the development of master-slave classes within communism itself. And the most remarkable quote, they claim to be working for justice, but they have simply replaced capitalist exploitation with bureaucratic tyranny. The state is ruled by those who control ideology, while the masses remain powerless. You see, if I would not know better, I would have thought that maybe Guy Debord is a student of Baal HaSulam. But I do know better, because I know that the social writings of Baal HaSulam were not even published within his small circle of students and disseminated within his small circle of students until maybe 10 years ago. So it's quite remarkable to think that Guy Debord is a certain, I don't know, a descendant of Baal HaSulam, even though the manuscripts were never really published. But I am sure that they would have found a lot to agree between each other. But the remarkable really thing in the overall teaching of Baal HaSulam is that it also contains a very in-depth discussion about the core reason why these kind of classes develop and how we can solve it. And this is a very deep existential crisis within humanity. It's not an economical crisis within humanity. It is an existential crisis within humanity. Because you see, this hysteria, this mass hysteria that society has developed of deprivation, of the fact that every human being feels that he needs to live in a jungle where his necessities will not be met unless he will, in the most egoistical manner, fight for them and trample over any kind of communal moral existence in the world. And the most cynical ones are the ones that becomes the exploiters, become the elite of the bureaucracy. They will do anything to maintain their small necessities. And what Baal HaSulam is arguing is that with a bit of altruism, I'm not talking here now communism that everybody will own nothing and we live in boxes of minimal commodities. Talking about minimal mindset, altruistic mindset, of a communal mindset. Society is so powerful that it can give people their necessities in abundance, much more than the bureaucrats have. But because the bureaucratic mind is primitive, they are not capable of saying this. They think that if they will just give up over the power that they have accumulated, then they will collapse into having nothing. And Baal HaSulam argues that this is absolutely not true. With a bit of mutual guarantee within society, the technologies that we currently have can provide abundance for us beyond the dreams of anybody. And that is a very, very, very deep teaching. And hopefully, we will be able to expand more about the criticality of this teaching for our generation. Baal HaSulam said that it will be critical for the whole world, for society as a whole, and most critical in our state, in Israel, as we see it. Yeah, Israel is very dysfunctional because exactly of this mass hysteria, that everybody thinks that he needs to fight for a very, very tiny part of the whole that we can create together in mutual guarantee between each other and assure that everybody will be more than satisfied. So, thank you very much for listening. It's one of the longest ever broadcasts in our channel, but an unexpected. Yeah, I thought it would be just a few minutes, but no, I did not think that it would be just a few minutes, but I think it's a very important subject, never before discussed, I think, in such a way. Thank you very much for listening. Very important things. Please, if you enjoyed. If you find it interesting, important, please help disseminate. Subscribe.